Hey guys, my name's Steve Walter, and today I wanted to talk to you about why you might not need Photoshop. It's time for Tuesday Tips. Today I want to show you why you might be able to just use Lightroom for all of your edits. Now, depending upon the type of shoot that you're doing, you might need to use Photoshop, but a lot of times you don't actually have to. So I want to show you some examples of images that I worked on recently from a lifestyle shoot, well, recently meaning a year ago, from a lifestyle shoot, and I edited them completely in Lightroom, and I was able to get the exact result that I wanted. What's nice about that is that when you make those changes in Lightroom, you have the ability to sync those settings across multiple images very quickly. Now in Photoshop, you would have to drag layers over. Potentially would take you a lot more time because you're working with individual files one at a time, saving them individually. Lightroom allows for that process to be a lot faster. So I want to show you just some examples here, and hopefully this will help you refine your approach and your workflow to editing images to their full completion. Now, let me go ahead and pull this image up here. This was something, we shot this at 5:13 in November. So I was going for an early morning look here or a late afternoon. Well, what we didn't have was actually any real sun. I'll show you what I mean. Here's the before image. I'm gonna go into the develop module, hit the slash key, and this is gonna give us, there's our before shot. So it was pretty cold and kind of meh, right? We scheduled to go down to the city and do a shoot and just didn't get the sky that I wanted. I didn't get the atmosphere that I wanted. I was hoping for a nice warm sunset. So what I had was a light with me, which you can't see here, but you can tell by the shadow on her feet that I have a rim light just behind her. And that's what's giving her that cutout there, because that light definitely did not exist. And when I processed it, here's the after, you can see I really emphasized that. I added in this nice warmth and this glow to it, and I complemented that with some purple tones, and I think that's what really allows this to have that almost early morning feel. And I really think that this image works a lot better this way than it does this way. So let me show you how I made some of those adjustments. First, I'm gonna go over here to the radial gradient. Now, if I click on that, you can see what I've done is where I've removed highlights, dropped my exposure, and cooled off the overall surrounding area. So if I really drag this exposure slider, you'll see really that's kind of the mask that I have there. Now, I don't want it that dark by any means, so I'm gonna undo that. But you can see a before, if I scroll down here, this little toggle switch, if I click on that, you can see here it is without just that radial gradient, and here it is with that radial gradient. Now there's another one that you can't really see, it's hidden, so I'm gonna zoom out a little bit over here. Let's go to our 1:8 view. There's one also right up here in the corner. So what that's doing is I'm adding that warmth. Here it is, that orange tone. I've removed some clarity. I've added the whites and the exposure, and my temperature is slid over. So that's what's giving me this nice, warm, sort of simulated sun. Couple that with the light that I fired against the backside of her, that's what really sells that look. And what also works is the fact that that's actually where the sun was. Now, granted, it wasn't as bright, but if you look on the buildings in the background, you can see that I'm mimicking the same direction of light. So that way I'm not contrasting it and it doesn't look fake, right? I'm trying to sell this image as best I can, especially for a cold November afternoon. So those are just the radial gradients there. There's one here and then there's one up here. What also helps this image out is using the brush tool. So when I go onto the brush tool, you can see whatever turns pink is what shows me where I actually brushed. If you want to change that, here's this tip for you. Shift and O will cycle through the colors of that mask. By default, I typically have it on red, or green is helpful. You can also go to white or black. Let's use green for this example. So anywhere you see green is where I'm adding a white boost and a little bit of warmth in there. So that's also helping. And if I turn that off, let's zoom this back in. So if I turn that off by using this little toggle switch, you can see there's very subtle adjustments as I toggle this before and after here. But again, it's something where I'm trying to add in this overall warm atmosphere to this image that didn't exist there. So far we've just used a radial gradient and the brush tool to really kind of add in this overall warmth and atmosphere that I wanted for this shot. The last thing that I did was I actually used the spot removal tool. So if I click on that, I used it at a couple of locations. Up here in the top right, there used to be some tree branches, and let me go ahead and do a before on just that. You can see there were tree branches. There was also this spot over on the railing, this like white residue tape, and I wanted to get rid of that. And there was a leaf down in the foreground a little bit here that I didn't like, and I wanted to remove that. So just with using the spot healing brush tool in here, which by all means is a bit of a crude tool, right? It's not as refined as Photoshop, but it worked. And it allowed me to do these changes very quickly across multiple images. And here's also a bonus tip for you. If you ever use the spot healing brush tool, and let's say you're trying to remove something, oh, I don't know, I'm just going to make a very obvious change. I'm gonna go over here on the top of this building, just so we can really see it. If I click, what it's gonna do is it's gonna try to find an area that's gonna be better suited for replacing that. You can see what it did was actually fairly intelligently grabbed from another building, right? And if I don't like that, I can actually change that with the / key. I can tell it, look for a new spot automatically, // So it's automatically jumping between spots that it think will work to heal that area that I've selected. Now, by all means, if you want to, you can always grab the opposing end here and place it wherever you like. But sometimes it's nice to let Lightroom figure it out for you. So that's just a bonus tip. I want to get rid of that. I don't want to keep that, so I'm just going to hit delete here. One of the other things that I wanted to mention with this brush tool is when we talk about layers, a lot of people think that Lightroom should have layers, kind of like Photoshop does. And I disagree with that. I think the layers that it has are adjustment layers, and they work just great. So things like dodging and burning are really easy to do in Lightroom. So I want to show you something really quick for just the dodging. Let's say this is a sneaker ad, right? Or it's a shot for a sneaker campaign. And I want to make those sneakers a little bit brighter, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the adjustment brush, hit new, and I'm going to reset all of my settings by double-clicking on the effect title. So that means everything is zeroed out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase this by 1.75. I just clicked arbitrarily because I want to see the effect happening. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller by using my left bracket key. And then I want to feather that edge by holding Shift and using the right bracket key. So that's going to feather out that edge just a little bit. And now what I can do is just paint over the sneakers. Now before I do that, I'm going to scroll down and make sure this auto mask is unchecked, because I don't want it to do any masking for me. I want it to add exposure everywhere that I paint, but I feathered the edge so it's a nice soft painting. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And you can see I'm getting a little pinwheel on there. And you can see her feet are glowing, which is not very nice right now, but it's okay because, again, this was meant to be very crude, quick, and soft. And I definitely don't want it to be 1.75. Now, if I go outside of an area that I don't want, hold the Option key, bring that brush size down. I'm going to reduce the feather by using the Shift key and the bracket key. There we go, right about there. It just went onto the sidewalk, and I want to just remove that. So I have the ability to do that. I'm going to adjust my flow for my eraser tool here. So that way it really adds everything in good. Something like that, and maybe just the back heel here. So I'm just refining this mask that I painted, which again is really just an adjustment layer. And the adjustment tools that I have are all right here in front of me, any combination of them, which is kind of different from what you can get in Photoshop. Sometimes in Photoshop you have to have multiple layers to achieve color adjustments and exposure adjustments. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to dial this exposure back maybe to 0.3, and maybe what I want to do is just increase that shadow area slightly, right? So now I'm really refining the adjustment that I'm making, and maybe it's something just as subtle as that. So if I do a before and after, now the trade-off with this is that if I turn off brush adjustments, it's going to turn off all my brush adjustments, not just what I did right here on the sneakers. But I can still see a before and after, and you can see it's just added this nice little kiss of light onto her feet. Now let's say I maybe wanted to change the shoe color, or let's say I maybe wanted to change the color of her sweatshirt. Now, normally in Photoshop you would go through with a pen tool or some other selection tool. Maybe you would use a color selection tool and target that pink that's on her sweatshirt. What's cool is that you can actually do that in Lightroom. So let me show you how we do that. I'm going to grab a new brush. I'm going to double click the effect to reset everything. And now I'm going to go back to where it says auto mask, and I'm going to check that. I'm going to make this brush big, and I'm going to make it hard. So I'm going to hold Shift to make it as hard as I can, so 0 feather, and I'm going to make it big. I'm going to make it as big as I need to cover the whole sweatshirt. So you can see that this circle right now covers well beyond the sweatshirt. I could probably make it a little bit smaller here. And I want to be able to click in this sort of mid-tone color of her sweatshirt. And I'll show you why, because with Auto Mask, what I'm doing is I'm telling it automatically create a mask based on the color that I click once. So I'll show you how this works. Before I do anything, again, just so we can really see the effect, I'm going to increase the exposure. And with Auto Mask checked, I'm going to click once on this sort of mid-tone area here. I don't want to click really dark in the shadows, and I don't want to click right up here in the highlights. I want that mid-tone area. I'm going to click once, and sure enough, that looks pretty good. Now, granted, I don't want to keep it this way, but you can see what's happened is that it's targeted primarily her sweatshirt. Now, it's spilled out a little bit, but as we discovered, if I hold Option, what I can do is I can erase on the areas that I don't want. So, what I'm going to do is make sure that I can see that mask. So anything that's green in an area other than her sweatshirt, I want to remove. Like it hit her face a little bit here because she probably has some of those red tones in her face. So I'm just holding Option and painting over that. And I'll remove that. And again, I'm doing this fairly quickly. I want things to be speedier than having to go into Photoshop and make really refined selections. Now, again, it's not always the case, but a lot of times you can achieve what you're looking for just by using Lightroom. You don't have to go to Photoshop, or I don't want people to think that they have to know Photoshop, because it is very overwhelming to start to learn Photoshop because it's very different from Lightroom. So there we go. I've refined that. Now let's change the color. So the way I do that, I'm going to double click on my exposure to reset it because I just did that for example purposes. I'm going to turn off my mask by typing O. So it should look just the way it did originally, and it does. Now what I'm going to do is go down to saturation and bring that down to maybe -75-ish to almost make it like a gray tone, because I want to remove the color before I add in a new color. Let's actually go all the way down to -100. Then I'm going to go down to the color swatch here, and let's say I want to make this like a, let's say like a purplish blue. Maybe I want it to match her sneakers in the reverse color, maybe like that. And maybe I'm going to bring it a little bit more there. So now that's closer there. And then what else I would want to do is maybe drop the exposure slightly. And then maybe add in some contrast there. Now you can see there's little parts that maybe were missed. You can go in and refine that. And especially if you're using something like a Wacom stylus, it makes that process a lot easier. I want to show you guys that you don't have to go to Lightroom to do these changes, and that was pretty efficient. Depending upon the image that you're working on, you might need to do extensive adjustments, so yeah, use Photoshop for that. But you don't always have to. If I hit the G key, it's going to bring me back to the grid, and here I can see the images side by side. If I double click on this image, I hit the D key, I want to just show you a before and after because I was able to get those two images to match. Here it is. That to me is not as impactful as this. And that was all done in Lightroom. The same way that I was showing you with radial adjustments, the adjustment brush, and a lot of those settings I can synchronize over, replace them, and then they're good to go. So I hope that shows you guys that you don't always need Photoshop. It's a great tool. I love it actually. But a lot of times if I can do all the editing that I want to just in Lightroom, I will. Why use Photoshop if you don't have to? So part of why I'm mentioning this is because I'm going to be teaching some classes, and there'll be links in the description if you wanted to get more information and if you wanted to purchase tickets. The first class that I'm going to be doing is a portrait workflow class, and that's hosted by the Photo Plug. Now it's going to be here at my studio, and the idea behind that is that we're going to go outside, we're going to take some pictures, we're going to come back inside, import them to Lightroom, figure out how to organize them, edit them, retouch them, and then go through the process of exporting and sharing them. So that's sort of a start to finish overall workflow of a portrait session. The other class that I'm going to be teaching is specifically just on Lightroom. So things like this, but diving in even deeper, right? Being able to go through all of these adjustments, being able to go through all the organizational tools, that's going to be a 6-week course. So again, links to that information is going to be in the description of this video. So if you guys had any questions, post a comment, send me a message, or head over to those websites and then you'll get more information there as well. So I hope this is helpful for you guys to see. You don't need Photoshop, but when you do need Photoshop, it's great. But if you can just use Lightroom, why not? I hope that was helpful. I'll see you guys next week.